Yes, indeed. Welcome back. We're focusing on the economy, and it is indeed a big one because, yes, we're a middle-income economy, emerging market, but if you look through, we're ranked as the 27th largest economy in the world in terms of the nominal GDP, and the 22nd largest in terms of our purchasing power parity. But then you look through the poverty clock, it doesn't tell a good story for the country. Or look at that. So it's a huge one. Millions of people living in poverty. Well, the government did also say that they want to do something about all of that to get Nigerians 100 million, the president did say, out of poverty in 10 years. So there'll be a lot of dynamics and matrix.
That's actually
what it is.
As at the moment, we are not, according to the World Poverty Clock, we're not up to 100 million yet. So for the government to be saying over the next 4 years, that's an assumption.
Okay. So to understand this dynamic, what is this about this poverty clock and decoding some of these things? We've got Roman Osehale. He joins us this morning. He is a business survey analyst. Thank you for coming on. Good to see you.
Thank you.
So this definitely will create a lot of worry for the country. But if you look through history, we seem to be getting worse on a yearly basis with this same poverty clock. And it raises more concerns. And I mean, some authorities will say, in spite of all that we seem to be doing, this figure still doesn't look good. What do we need to understand and do to put us in good stead?
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me over. Over the past 5 years, I have devoted my time and resources into looking for answers. And recently, a statement was made that by 2040, Nigeria and the DRC will account for 40% of the total population that would live in extreme poverty by 2040. That got me worried, and I went into actions, to do the research, to do the calculations and stuff. And eventually, I was able to decode how this stuff is calculated and what we need to do to reverse that trend. Now, if you look at it, right, if you look at the World Poverty Clock, you'll find out that majority of the poverty is concentrated in sub-Saharan Africa, right? Now, of the 6 continents, God blessed Africa alone with 1/3 of all Earth's mineral reserve. 1/3, that's 33.3%. Now, of those 33.3%, sub-Saharan Africa alone holds over 95% of the total mineral wealth of Africa. But yet, that's where you find the extreme poverty increasing. So why is it increasing? First, it is easy, right, to predict something, a system that has procedures and processes. But if you look at 2040, now they say Buhari created poverty, right? Now let's look at 2040. Between now and 2040 is what? 21 years.
And the president won't be there.
Good. Now, between now and 2040 is 21 years, we're going to have 4 presidents. By the grace of God, President Buhari will finish in 2023. Between 2023 and 2040 is 17 years. We're going to have 2 presidents that are going to come into office and do, if everything goes well, do 8-year tenure each, right?
That's at
That's
least
16 years.
At least 2 presidents.
Exactly. And then the 3rd president will be in office in 1 year, right? Spending 1 year. So it's not a person thing. It is a system thing. The system creates extreme poverty. The system creates poverty. The truth is this. Let me say it as it is. The Nigerian economic model is not, or was not, designed to create wealth. It is actually designed to impoverish the people.
Yeah. The thing about that is this. If you say our economic model,
yes,
but When the CBN then says, look, we have a microeconomic model like India, France, US, UK. So what is different with theirs and ours?
I'll explain. See, we run or operate what is called an asset depletion economy, where you deplete assets to fund whatever you want to do. Now, if you look at the world poverty clock, as I mentioned earlier, the countries that are increasing extreme poverty are in the region where you have the most mineral resources. Now, for you to understand what I'm about to analyze, you need to understand the concept of the income statement and balance sheet. What is your income statement? Your income statement is a statement of revenue and expenditure, right? Also known as a statement of profit and loss, right? Where you record your daily income vis-a-vis your expenditure. Now, but your balance sheet is a statement of net worth, right? Where your assets equals your liabilities plus your shareholders' equity. And at the end of the day, your asset is your at the end of the day, your net worth is your asset minus liability. Now let us go to slide. Go to slide.
Which heading is that?
Sorry?
Which of the headings?
No, go to slide 5, the real wealth of nations. Now, how did the World Bank, actually the World Bank came about this, right? In the 80s, the World Bank found out that, so in the 80s and 90s, something was happening. The World Bank found out that a lot of countries were increasing GDPs, right? And they did not know what was really happening. So the World Bank sat down and said, okay, they did their findings and found out that a lot of these countries were increasing GDPs not out of productivity. They were actually increasing GDP because they were depleting their mineral resource assets, right? Good. Now, they were depleting their mineral resource assets. So as they were depleting their mineral resource assets, they sell, right? And then they make money and they spend. So the World Bank sat down and decided and said, you know what? We need to really define what makes up the wealth of a country. So they now categorized the wealth of each country for the world, right, in 4 broad categories. First, it was produced capital into 4 broad categories. Produced capital, human capital, natural capital, and net foreign assets. Now, the produced capital, that's your infrastructure, bridges, roads, airports, the railroad, power generation, right, seaports. Now, and it also includes your machineries and your manufacturing. Human capital asset, that's your skills, your education, your innovation. Your natural capital, it's your forestry, your waterways, your gold, crude oil, and all the other mineral resources. Now, the natural assets, right, they now grouped it into 2, renewable and non-renewable. Now, what's the difference? Renewable. Renewable assets are those that you can renew. For instance, you have a lake, right? A lake that can hold maybe 100,000 tons of fish. Now, you keep fishing, and then at the end of the day, you deplete that asset because your fishery is your assets, right? You deplete it to maybe 40 tons. And then the government says, you know what, no more fishing. We need to renew this asset to increase it. So the government says, okay, they pass a policy and say, no more fishing for now. We want to increase this, the fish, the tonnage of fish in this lake. So they raise fingerlings and then introduce them into the lake. 3 months later, you have 120 tons, right? When they grow up. So you have been able to what? To increase that asset.
To renew.
Yeah, it's called renewable assets.
How about the other one?
The oil won't fall under non-renewable. The earth produces that itself. And you know, they produce them over millions of years. Your diamonds, your gold, your natural gas, all those come under non-renewable assets. Now, the last one, which is the net foreign assets, that's where you have your foreign direct investment, you have your sovereign wealth fund, you have your foreign reserve, right? And then you have your foreign debt too. So when the World Bank now did this, they now brought out a formula on how to monitor these things. Now, what each country should do is this. You have these 4 broad categories of assets. You know how to manage them, right? Because at some point you would deplete. So where do you put money? If you understand the concept of the balance sheet, that at the end of the day, right, once you deplete your assets, maybe you sell your assets, you gain money. What you use that money to do will either determine whether you get richer or you're going to get poorer. You understand? Do you understand it?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, that will determine whether you're going to get richer or you're going to get poorer. So if you pump that money, for instance, you borrow, let's just say 500 million, right? Immediately you borrow 500 million, it is recorded under your liabilities as it's recorded under your liabilities as 500 million. But at the same time, it is recorded under your assets, right? Now, what you now do with that 500 million will determine whether you're going to get richer or you're going to get poorer.
So let me quickly ask you.
Okay.
This wealth of nations that you talked about,
yes,
does it apply to all countries equally? Or
all countries.
Whether you're a developed nation?
No. All countries. It's the same metrics they use to measure everybody.
And I think that's also another challenge I'd like to bring up. We know that poverty mapping does not exactly have a gold standard, such that there are different ways to measure poverty. Now, for the World Poverty Clock, they use a series of methods such that it's like a wide net for all the countries. But you know that Nigeria is heterogeneous. It's not a homogeneous country like other countries. So how are we sure that some of those figures really capture what is on ground? Yes, we understand that there's really poverty on ground, but then is this the best way to measure poverty for Nigeria?
Well, I would say it is the best way, right? Because there's got to be a standard matrix for everybody. You understand? And as I keep saying, you need to understand the concept of the balance sheet, because the balance sheet is what calculates your net worth. As I said earlier, we run an asset depletion economy. Once you deplete your assets, right, your liabilities increases, and as your liabilities increases, you're getting poorer.
So
this is simple economic and accounting principle.
That's understandable. But then, if you go to the methodology for this, World Poverty Clock, you realize that the organization that did this, which is funded by the German government, says that a major challenge for calculating poverty in Nigeria is, on one hand, we don't have adequate data. For example, I mean, the data they have is about 2013, and they say that's even better than the other one they will have used.
Exactly.
So we have these challenges, and they also said that, there's a challenge with measuring poverty in Nigeria, but then, let's just do this just to have figures. So don't you think that's a challenge too?
If you also look at the methodology, right, they also said that in the places where you do not have data, they actually generated data, and this is the method in which they used in generating those data. And I'm going to tell you this, they are 99.9% correct. Well, when I proceed, right, you come to understand that the methodology is correct. Okay. Now, let us go to...
Do you want to look at this asset by region?
No, let us go to slide 4.
Which
formula
is?
To build wealth. Now, so the World Bank came up with the adjusted net savings. Right? They came up with the adjusted net savings. Now, where your adjusted net savings equals net national savings, that's what you already have, plus education expenditure, minus energy depletion, minus mineral depletion, minus net forest depletion, minus damages from carbon dioxide emission, minus damages from particulate emissions. Now, if you understand the concept of the balance sheet, right, let us perform, this is crude oil, right? Let's just say this is crude oil. to get richer, you must create wealth. As of today, we have about 37.07 billion barrels of crude in our reserve, right? And in the next 45, I think 46 or 47 years, we're going to run out of crude. So let's just say this I am selling, and I drill and I sell 2.2 million barrels a day, right? If you go by 2.2 million barrels a day that we're drilling, in the next 46, 47 years, we're not going to have oil anymore. That means that what? You're depleting your assets, right? So Chamberlain, you buy this from me, pay me.
Okay, but while paying you,
Yes.
I have to also take cognizance of the CBN's cashless policy. So
The cash handling
cash
charges.
handling charges.
Okay.
If it's above a certain limit, there's cost of
Okay, let's
handling.
just say this thing
But
cost.
assuming, and then I pay you
Okay.
for this crude.
Good. Now, the thing is this: have I made money?
So they see this and think you've made money because
Money
the
exchange.
transaction has
Value,
been
value
done.
for value.
Okay, let me rephrase my question. Have I created wealth? And if you say I've made money, how did I make money? Remember, right? Let me go back so you understand. When the World Bank, right, did that, they actually estimated the wealth of every country. Now, for low-income countries, produced capital was about 14% of their total wealth. Human capital, 41%. Natural capital, 47%. Net foreign assets, minus 2%. Now, lower middle income countries, which Nigeria, right, is a part of, produced capital is 25% of total wealth. Human capital, 51%. Natural capital, 27%. And then net foreign assets, minus 3%. But when you now break down that of Nigeria personally, right, what you now find out is this: our produced capital is 10.3% of our total wealth. Human capital is 55.9%. Natural capital, about 35%. And then net foreign assets, minus 1%, right?
Okay. So,
Now,
so what they're doing is
now,
that they're weighing
what-
this singular incident
Good. Now,
with that
let's-
standard of measurement.
Good. Now let's go back to this, right? Remember, the crude oil is under natural capital. It's part of 35% of my total wealth, right? You drill 2.2 million barrels and you paid me this. I ask again, have I made money?
It looks like you've made money.
No, I have not. I have not created wealth.
In concept of
Good, yes.
that
The
particular
only thing I
matrix.
have done is I have converted. I only converted
Your
part
natural resources.
of my natural resources. Remember, this thing makes up 35% of my total wealth.
Quickly,
So
quickly,
hold on,
quickly,
hold on.
quickly,
Hold
just
on,
quickly.
hold on,
Okay.
hold on. I only converted that 2.2 million to current assets, and I'm spending.
In other words, you made money but didn't create wealth.
No, I did not make money. I only converted one asset to the other.
So
See.
how can you then say you've made money?
Good. Go back to the formula. The net adjusted savings. Remember, when I drill, I create a liability. This is a liability already.
Because it's non-renewable.
It's non-renewable. Do you understand? I've created a liability. So as I create liabilities, right, and I spend the current assets
Without
without renewing this, am I getting richer? You're getting poorer.
so
Right? So that's why, listen, that's why it's easy for Bill Gates to say by 2040, you're going to account for 40% of the people living in extreme poverty.
So-
because your economy is based on asset depletion. And as you deplete your assets, your liabilities are increasing.
So he sees that when we deplete assets,
Yes.
crude and all of those resources, we don't replenish the other components of that matrix, by extension, balance
God
the
bless you.
sheet.
Now,
So we don't
good,
make money.
Good. Because as you do this, you create these liabilities. We will get to what countries are doing, right? And how they are eradicating extreme poverty. And it will interest you.
Before we get there,
Yes.
is there a way to have converted this and created wealth at the same time? Is there a way
Good.
to
Now,
deplete
see,
and convert wealth?
I always say this. The wealth is not in the mineral resources. The wealth is in the value added. That's why the guy who is refining this is the one smiling to the bank with the billions, right? Now, let's leave that out, right? But if you look at the cocoa industry, the same thing is happening. Cocoa industry is about 100 billion. And then Africa produces about 60 to 70% of the cocoa seeds processed worldwide. Netherlands that does not process cocoa, right? Or cocoa is a tropical plant. Netherlands that does not grow cocoa processes about 13% of all cocoa seeds worldwide into chocolate, drinks, and stuff. And then they sell it to us back at premium price. Of the 100 billion, what is Africa's share? Just 2 billion, 2%. So the money, the wealth is not in the mineral resources. The wealth is in the value added. And that's why when you look at the formula, right, it says plus education expenditure. Anything you spend on education, right, pays rent over that person's lifetime.
So then take us through that, because I know we've said education is very key, but investments in education, if you go through how we've spent on education, because I suspect that this is part of what you say Bill Gates has seen, that if we're depleting wealth in this area and we don't seem to be balancing the other three components of the asset management economy, we definitely are going one way.
Yes.
Which is not making money.
Yes.
What do we have to do about education?
Good. Now, if you look at the formula, right, it says plus education expenditure. Now, it is assumed, right, that when you spend on education, that funds keep paying its rent over a child's lifetime, even till they die, right? Knowledge is not wasted. Knowledge is passed from generation to generation. So when you look at, let's look at slide 19, return on investment in education, slide 19. Now, it is assumed, right, that for every $1 spent on education, when you go through pre-K, it gives you a return of $7. High school, return of $11. University graduate, return of about $16. All these things differ, right? Some people have said even as much as $32. But the thing is this. When you look at our investment in education, right, as it says, we are depleting mineral resources, creating liability. We are depleting our net forest, creating liability. We are depleting all our resources. Now, what is supposed to now give us returns, if you understand the concept of the balance sheet, right? That when you borrow, whatever you use that money to do, when you have liquid cash, whatever you use that money to do is what now determines whether you get richer or you're getting poorer. Now, if you borrow 500 million and you turn that money around and make 100 million profit, it is recorded against what? Shareholders' equity, right? Education here is what is supposed to help us record returns that will be recorded against shareholders' equity that will reduce our liability. And this is the reason why you find out that foreign countries don't touch their mineral resources.
Yeah, but what about countries like Afghanistan?
Good.
What
we
do
will
they
get
do
to,
to be-
we
to
will
be
get
a
to
good
that. You see what they are doing. Afghanistan has wiped out extreme poverty, right? Now let's go to slide 10. Percentage of education expenditure to GDP 1980 to 1992. Now, in 1980, we had an education expenditure of 3.16%. This is what is supposed to give us the return, right? Now, remember, this extreme poverty thing, right, as Bill Gates said, and I calculated and I saw that he was spot on, right? You can predict a system. You can't predict anybody. He said this. I said there was going to be 4 presidents before 2040. Does he know whether we're going to bring back Einstein from the dead or we're going to go bring back John Maynard Keynes or Adam Smith to come and lead this economy?
Okay, we'll let you tell them the answer when we come back from the break in a moment. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. The concept wherein you say what Bill Gates saw, but the particular focus on education. What are we not doing right?
Yeah, but you look at what Bill Gates, or if you go back to what Bill Gates said when he looked at the Economic Recovery Development Plan, right? Growth plan, right? Now, he said something that it does not meet the needs of the people. We are investing in infrastructure, produce goods, right? And that is good. But what is supposed to give us returns to reduce this liability is education, right? Now, when you calculate how much we've been investing, the funds that have been going into education over the years, when I did the calculation, it still gives us that liability because it's not able to cover that liability. Even when you calculate at $11 return to $1 investment. It doesn't give us. So until we invest more in education, right, to help us cover that loophole. And then second, let's go to slide. Let us see how we get poorer. Now remember, the formula says minus what? Mineral resources. We have looked at the mineral resources, right? Now, we are depleting and creating liabilities of 2.2 million barrels a day. In 46, 47 years, we're not going to have this product anymore, right? That means we're getting poorer. Second, let us look at our net forest. Go to slide 13, please.
What's the title?
No, slide 13. The China-Nigeria forest area square kilometers, 1990 to 2016.
Oh, there you go.
Now, when you look at it, right, why did I choose this? There's something happening that nobody is looking at and also contributing to our extreme poverty. Remember, the formula says what? Minus mineral resources, the depletion, minus net forest depletion. Now, when you look at this, right, you look at Nigeria's net forest depletion from 1990. Nigeria's forest reduced from 172,340 square kilometers in 1990 to 65,834 square kilometers in 2016. We've lost 106,506 square kilometers of forest. 61.8% of our net forest have been depleted over 29 years. Yeah. Now, hold on. Let's go to the next slide, please. China, Nigeria forest area, percentage of land area, 1990 to 2016. Now, why did I pick China, right? You look at this, right? In 1990, 18.9% of our forested area of our country was forested area, right? Now, the next slide, please. Next slide. Slide 14. 18.9% of Nigeria was forested area. By 2015, it had reduced to 7.2. Now, at the same time, China in 1990 only had 16.7% of their country covered in forest. But yet, China in 2016 had increased to 22.3%. China has added over 523,000 square kilometers, roughly 56% the size of Nigeria, over this same period. But why am I picking on China? There's something happening no one is looking at, right?
Does it have to do with our population?
No, it doesn't have to do with our population. The illegal logging going on in Nigeria, right, is also part of what is creating our extreme poverty because it is our net asset depletion. Now, think of it this way. A country, go to the next slide, please. Go to slide.
What's the title?
Hold on, please. Let me find it. Go to slide 29, please. Go to slide 29. Now, if you look at it, right, the Rosewood rackets, China's billion-dollar illegal timber trade and the deforestation of Nigeria's rainforest, right? Now, you find out that the same people that we are selling these things to are not depleting theirs, rather they are growing theirs. Do you know why? I'll explain to you. countries are planting trees. Remember I said renewable what? Renewable assets, right? Now, countries are planting trees. They come up with this concept of climate change. It's not just about climate change. What they are doing is they are showing up their assets.
So,
You know, if I may, so while we try to draw policies to renew these assets, as it were, shouldn't we be also focusing on our areas of comparative advantage? You look at the UAE, for example, there's not much forest there, and they're doing very well. So on one hand, we have human capital, which is our major advantage, and other comparative advantages. So shouldn't we be talking about them too?
Yes, we should, and that should be the center of it, right? I'll give you a figure. In 2012, right, when they looked at the wealth of countries, Britain, the OECD countries, on average, human capital accounted for 70% of their total wealth. In fact, in 2012, Britain's total wealth, 89% of it was human capital. US, 75% was human capital. And then Japan had the highest human capital, right, at over 90%.
So that's probably where we should focus.
Yeah, we should focus on that. But we should also, because there's what you call quick returns, right? You look at countries like Afghanistan. They've wiped out extreme poverty. What did they do? Do you know how many trees they planted? Pakistan planted 1 billion trees at a cost of 160 million. When you go to tree value calculator, then you understand. 1 billion trees, right? When I did, let's go to slide 34. Estimated value of 1 billion trees at 5 meters tall and trunk size of 400. Let's go to slide 34, please. 33, please. Slide 33. Good. Now, this is something that we should do, and do it as an urgent measures. We have been depleted, as in our forest reserve have been depleted. Now, if you look at the whole of Africa, right, about $30 billion worth of logs leave Africa every year. Now, of those 54 countries in Africa, 46 are in sub-Saharan Africa. The countries of North Africa do not have trees, right? So that means that this logging takes place in what? In mostly sub-Saharan Africa. And then if you look at that 30 billion and go by an average, that means that each country loses about $652 million, right, on average, of logs every year. That is serious depletion of assets.
now about our natural resources.
Yes.
If in years to come, we don't have crude anymore,
Yes.
and then we have all the natural resources, and we leverage on those natural resources, we can still do good.
Yeah, but you see, you're still going to be depleting. Look, let us even talk about the bitumen. We have more bitumen in Nigeria, right, than we have crude oil. We have about 42 billion barrels of bitumen. If we finish the crude oil and then we start depleting the bitumen, we're not getting any richer. Follow the concept of the balance sheet. Now, what they do, right, what the World Bank found out is this. I think from the 80s, Nigeria has been recording 2.6% de-savings. De-savings. That means that our expenditure supersedes our savings, right? So you can't save. Savings is supposed to equal change in wealth, and change in wealth is investment.
Now, speaking about education, I also know that Zimbabwe, they are in green as well.
Yeah.
In this poverty clock, and I had to look through and saw that, look, they have this adult literacy rate. It increased from 77.8% in 1982 to 86.9% in 2015,
Yeah.
at an average growth rate of 2.87%.
Yeah.
And then in this, if you look at revenue income vis-a-vis our investment in education is very low.
Yeah.
If we improve on our funding education budget year on year, how much of an impact will we have?
It will have a great impact. Now, there are 5 things, right, that we need to do. The president is already doing 2 of them, right, to reverse this extreme poverty. Now, if we start to plant trees, right, I've calculated everything. If we only increase education expenditure at 20% higher than what it is right now, there's a certain percentage of people who are going to move out of extreme poverty.
By planting trees?
No, education expenditure.
Okay.
Now, trees, if we plant trees, now let's go back to the slide 33. Now, at 1 billion trees that Pakistan planted, right? Now, when you calculate the value of the trees 5 years after, even if you put each tree at $250, right? Depending on the species of tree you've planted, that's a total wealth of about $250 billion. That means that you've shored up your assets, right, by 250 billion. And that's why a lot of countries, if you look at Philippines, right, Philippines says they passed a policy, you cannot graduate unless you plant trees. And going by one generation, 100 years, what they've estimated that between now and 100 years, they will have been able to plant about 525 billion trees. India, in one day, a region planted 50 million trees. Another region planted 66 million trees. Now, this is the problem. When you cut down trees, right? Let's go back to the formula so that I will explain how it affects the economy. Let's go back to the formula. I think...
Oh, there you have it.
Okay, good. Now, it says adjusted net savings equals net national savings plus education expenditure minus energy depletion, mineral depletion, net forest depletion. Now, when you deplete your net forest, what happens? Your carbon dioxide emissions increases. Right? Your carbon dioxide emission increases. Now, on an average, I think 2017, right? Nigeria's loss, damages from carbon dioxide emission was $2.666 billion. Now, damages from particulate emission was about $8 billion, $8 billion plus. When you add those two figures, you are looking at over almost $11 billion, right? That has been deducted from your balance sheet. Do you understand? While we are depleting our forests, selling to the Chinese are showing up there.
So it has a ripple effect.
Let me explain something, right? Trees are so vital. They are so vital. Trees play two important roles. One, the economic value. Let's use Aliko Dangote, Alhaji Aliko Dangote as an example. What is the economic value of Aliko Dangote? Is it 16 billion, right? That's the economic value. What is its economic benefit? The economic benefit of trees are so much, from erosion to shades to reduction of carbon dioxide to making you healthier. So, let me finish this. Let me finish this, please.
We're running a little bit out of time, so okay. But I want us to see how can we begin to reverse this trend. You've talked about depletion of natural resources as a key ingredient to creating poverty. You've talked about the fact that we haven't invested enough in education, and you've talked about the damage we are doing to our environment and all of that. How do we begin to reverse this trend? You said that the president has already indicated that.
Yes.
But very quickly, I need you to give us punchlines, what we need to do urgently to address this matter. The president said in June that the plan is to take 100 million Nigerians out of poverty over the next 10 years. On the average, that's 10 million per annum.
We can do it. See.
On the average, that's 278,000 per state.
We can.
How?
We can. There are 5 things we need to do. And I'm going to say this. We're actually making progress, but people don't know. The president is making progress. Now, go to slide 21. January 16, extreme poverty escape rates. Now, if you look at the circled part, right, the escape rate in January 2016 was 12.7 people per minute, right? Now, go to the next slide. Now, if you calculate that, right, you will find out that it amounts to about 6.6 million people per year. Now, go to the next slide. January 2017, the part I circled, the escape rate had reduced to 11.4, right? This is part of what people don't know. Now, when you look at that, That means that it has dropped, right? Now, when you calculate that, it's in the 6 million range too, but it has dropped. Remember, we are growing at 2.7%. Population is increasing. The escape rate is now reducing. Go to the next slide, please. When you go to the next slide, July 2018, what does it say? Minus 5.9 people. That means that from 12.7, we've reduced to 11.4, is now 5.9. Now, go to the next slide. July 2019, it's now what? 4.5.
But each of these that you are, even in what you have circled, the previous one says the target should be 13.9%.
Yes.
And
And
then
the
this
next
one,
one says
Yes.
15.5%.
This is how it works. As you reduce, right, it's telling you to meet that 2030 target of elimination, right? This is what needs to escape at every minute. So as you reduce, right, and as you get closer to that time, it increases. Hold on, Chamberlain. Now, when you look at July 2019, it's 4.5, right? Now, you look at 2023, it's 3.7. Now, they've made projections. Projection based on what you are doing now. The rate at which people are falling into extreme poverty is reducing, but
not fast enough.
Yes, not fast enough.
And the target rate is also increasing.
No, the target rate is increasing because you're getting closer to that time. That means you need to move more people quicker, right? Out of
And the population is also increasing.
Yes, but this is it. Why is it reducing? Two things President Buhari is doing. One, go back to the assets, produced assets, right? He's building roads, bridges. They are investing in produced assets. That means our assets are increasing. Second, our net foreign assets. He made the foreign reserve in what? In about 30 billion, right? And then right now it's about 45 billion. So we are actually richer in assets today. We might not have the liquid cash, but we are actually richer.
But
and
it is not reflecting in the people's lives. That's
okay,
why many
I
people...
understand that. Let's tell a story. Let's tell a story. You have two families, right? Family A and Family B. Family A inherits 10 plots of land at 50 million naira each, right? That means in assets, they are worth 500 million. Family B inherits the same thing. Family A now says, you know what? Let us change our lifestyle. From two-bedroom flat, they all move to duplexes, right? They start to travel around. They do whatever. They start to spend cash, right? In the eyes of the people, Family A has arrived, right? But Family B says, you know what? We are going to stick with our lifestyle. In fact, we were wearing the Gucci's. We were wearing the Louis Vuittons. We are now going to wear Ankara, 4,000 naira, right? Now, these 10 plots of land, we are going to sell 2. That is 100 million. We are going to develop another 2 and put 2, two duplexes each.
So which is Nigeria?
Sorry?
Which is Nigeria?
Nigeria.
Of
the two
No,
families.
in the past, we were Family A. We were spending, thinking, what is wealth? You ask yourself, what is the definition of wealth? Is wealth what you spend? Wealth is not what you spend. Wealth is what you have as savings and investment.
Let's wind down with this because they look at this similar experience and talk about Zimbabwe.
Yes.
They're in the green. And then they say, look, but the value of their currency is not what it used to be then. It's not what they want to be.
Value.
So you look at how it reflects on people's lives,
Yes.
as he highlighted. And he says, look, but in spite of all of those, it seems to be different in some other countries who the GDP and the lives of the people is a lot better than some countries that are green.
Yes.
How do they balance that out?
See, go back to the balance sheet. Is Zimbabwe investing in infrastructure? Yes. Are they investing in education, just like you just said? Yes. Right? Now, the 5 things we need to do to move people out of poverty. 1, I said President Buhari is already investing in produced goods, right? Which is already showing up our assets and making us richer, right? Our liabilities are reducing.
Right.
Second, we need to show up our foreign reserve. Third, the next thing we now need to do is increase our education expenditure. And then fourth, which we need to do is we need to start our renewable assets. Because as we're depleting the natural assets, right, we need to start planting trees. As we plant trees, if you plant 1 billion trees today, in 5 years, it could be worth about 250 billion naira. Then fourth, which is very key, The fifth one, which is very key. Please go to slide 27. Nigeria is being plundered and a major cause of our extreme poverty. Good. Now, the formula does not say whether you are depleting legally or illegally.
Depletion
right?
is depletion.
It's depletion. Now, illegal logging is going on in the Northeast. In Northwest, there's illegal mining. Between 2017 and 2019, we lost about 9 billion of illegal mining of gold, right? Illegal logging in the Northeast, about $1 billion. That is just rosewood. We've not talked about cherry. We've not talked about other types of wood. Then you look at the oil bunkering too, right? In 2009, it was estimated that between 2003 and 2008, $100 billion worth.
So what do we need to do about it?
If we block all these loopholes, right, we reduce our depletion.
In conclusion,
we reduce our liabilities.
In conclusion,
right?
for
and
today's
our
segment,
assets.
where does the population question come in? Because people have said, look, if the population is growing beyond the growth rate of the economy, we still have problems.
Good. Now, the reason why we're facing this quagmire today, right? In 1980, our population growth rate, in 1980, world population was 4.439 billion. By 2019, it's about 7.6 or 7.7 billion, right? In 39 years, what the world has added did not add from inception, right? Now, by 2050, the world population is going to be 10 billion. That means that in 70 years, we are going to add 5.6 billion people. The bane of part of what we're facing is our population growth.
What do we need to do about it?
Government needs to bring out a drastic policy.
Which is also
Like
a
China
strength,
did.
by the way.
Sorry?
The growth is also a strength.
Yeah, this growth is also a strength. If there are resources to quickly convert that strength, that growth rate to strength. But we don't have those resources.
Could that be such as investing more in education to
Definitely.
build the human capital?
You know that has always been my message, right? We need to invest more in education. Apart from investing in education, there are other areas. We need to block the leakage, right? Oil bunkering. If you look at it holistically, oil bunkering, 20 billion, right? Annually, we lose to oil bunkering. Illegal mining, 4.5 billion. Illegal logging, about 1 billion. Calculate all those funds, right? Add them to your balance sheet, and then plus the one you now do legally. Then what you now need to do is calculate it and now see whether the education returns gives you a positive. What the World Bank says is this: when adjusted net savings is in the positive, that means you're creating wealth. But when it's in the negative, you're getting poorer.
And going back to where you started out, it's a system thing.
It's a system thing.
Because some of these things you've highlighted, these are long-term plans that we need to put in place so that whoever comes in consistently follows.
Those trees can be done within a year. And I'm going to say this to President Buhari directly. Plant 1 billion trees and watch the poverty clock reverse itself. 1 billion trees in 5 years will give you about 250 to 300 billion dollars in return as insured up assets for the country. And that's what Pakistan did. Pakistan is not richer than us. Kenya is doing the same thing. The other day, Ethiopia planted 350 million trees in 12 hours.
Well, you know what? This poverty clock we're looking at is essentially about taking people out of poverty. People out.
What is wealth? Is wealth what you spend or what you have as savings and investment? If you have, for Christ's sake, if we have 1 billion trees planted today, that gives us a return of 250 to 300 billion in 5 years. Do you know what that is if we start to sell?
My brother wants money in his pocket, so I understand that. Everybody wants money in their pocket.
So what do we do to this crude oil?
We'll have to go. We'll go now.
I want to drink the crude oil.
Mr. Roman Osehala is a business survey analyst. Thank you for coming on this morning.